So when is a piece of technology too cheap? This device comes in at $29.99 on LITNXT, which I actually recommend because they include shipping. It's listed on the Anbernic website at $17.99, but you're going to pay for shipping on top of that. Compared to $29.99 excluding shipping for the 8-bit Do 2C, which this controller is a direct copy of. The only reason you can see the difference is because there's some color variations. It's not licensed by 8-bit Do, it is copied. Almost to the millimeter. The Anbernic does wired 2.4 gigahertz and Bluetooth connections, all varying their polling rates from 1000 hertz for the wired connection, 200 hertz for the 2.4 gigahertz connection, and Bluetooth is 180 hertz. So if polling rates are important to you, probably get the 8-bit Do controller, but let's not get crazy about polling rates, because remember, the standard Xbox controller comes in at 125 hertz. The Anbernic has back paddle macro buttons, so it has normal, just you squeeze it and there's back paddles. The 8-bit Do has these top macro buttons, which I said in my previous video might actually come in handy for people with mobility issues. If they can't wrap their hand around the controller, this is an easy way just to press a button on top as an extra button that you can macro from somewhere in the front. So overanalyze the design a little bit, and I am hard pressed to find any difference in the shell design. You know, it's difficult, I can't sort of morph them into one and compare them millimeter by millimeter, but these things are damn near identical. We've got the same stippled grip here. This is a slightly less aggressive stipple here. The Anbernic is like quite harsh on this side, but I do like it, you know, having a grip on your handheld. It's got the same design, the same sort of where it comes around slightly sharp on the edge here. It's exactly the same. These joysticks are the same, these just have LEDs, so if you like LEDs, it has it. The Dpad is damn near it. Like, I cannot see a difference. It's got the indentation, it's even got, another reviewer said the D-pad is more protruding on here. On my two units, this is the 8-bit Do 2C controller. They protrude out the body exactly the same. This is more of a genuine membrane D-pad, whereas this is some sort of hybrid where it's membrane but also dome switch. I'm not actually sure. It's got somewhere in between, which I actually prefer this D-pad. Now the action buttons, you know, we nitpicking here because Anbernic makes some of the best buttons in the business. You know, we've got nice little buttons here, but the action buttons almost identical sort of to the press. This has got a slightly softer press, and Anbernic have gone for a slightly more digital press. I'm actually not sure if these are, they say they're membrane buttons on the website, but they don't feel like it. So it's somewhere in between, and they've got bigger action buttons, more like the Switch, and it's got that squashed layout, whereas this has got more of a symmetrical diamond layout. In a huge twist of events, they've gone for the older design of their triggers and bumpers. You'll see here on this white 8-bit Do controller, this is the ultimate controller. The bumpers are the same and the triggers are the same, whereas on the 8-bit Do 2C controller, they've gone for these more, this has got a softer press and this has got more of a clicky digital press on this bumper, and it's a rounder feeling. So this is quite a nice bumper and it's bigger. Now let's quickly talk about these triggers, because this has got a slightly bigger range of motion, to the point where I thought these weren't analog triggers when I first got it. And I'll put the footage of me playing Forza Horizon trying to show you, but it definitely is an analog trigger. As you press it, the car goes faster. So it's got a lovely analog trigger motion. What I like about this controller, now I've been playing mostly on this controller, but the 8-bit Do, it tends to be a little bit snappy on the joysticks in terms of the dead zones and how it's calibrated. This has got a very soft, gentle push to it, so it's all about how they've put those dead zones in here. So when you're using these, it's really nice for racing on Forza Horizon, because you know, if I'm turning, if I do that like a full press, the car doesn't swerve to the right, it just does a gentle turn. So it's very nice for sort of, if you are the sort of person who steers like that. And then even though this has a shorter range of motion, there's just something about the way that they've calibrated, and again, probably got to do with the way they've set up the dead zones and that. and it just feels great, really nice. And then because it's a shorter range of motion, when I played Wolfenstein, it also just felt really nice because it's got a bit of it more of like a digital analog trigger as well, because it's somewhere in between, because the range of motion is a little bit less than my other controllers. So $29 for a controller that does everything is really good. You know, it connects to 2.4 gigahertz, connects via wired connection, connects via Bluetooth. If you're in Asia and the shipping is cheaper, then by all means, get the Anbernic. But if you're in the States and you can get the 8-bit Do on Amazon for a little or no shipping, definitely get the 8-bit Do. Unfortunately, the shipping costs make the Anbernic a cheap handheld that you're getting for a decent to moderate price, while the 8-bit Do is a mid-range handheld that you're getting for a decent to moderate price. And so you're getting a better controller. That's what I'm trying to say. I think where the Anbernic is going to sell well is on sites like LITNXT or Anbernic, where you're buying something and you may as well get a controller as well that you know is going to work with one of Anbernic's Linux devices. So let's quickly check that. I have managed to get the Bluetooth connected. Just going into the settings and connecting via Bluetooth, I used X and the pairing button, hold it for 3 seconds and then you connect. Couldn't get the 2.4 gigahertz. I do find this is hit and miss with these Linux devices. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Now, once you're connected, I used to just think that this wasn't working, but what you need to do is go into the settings of your RetroArch and you need to go into input. You go into input and you say Dpad binds. Now port 1 controls, you'll see the device index is Anbernic keys. Xbox One S wireless controller. So it's telling this that it's an Xbox One S controller. So we just say yes, and we go out of there. Now it's no longer working. So that is a good sign. Oh, cool. This is back button. That's action button. That might also be an issue. And if it is an issue, if you find your buttons are mapped incorrectly, you just go in here and you go to Dpad binds, you go to port 1 controls, and you can map your controls here. Now you can save this, but then it might cause issues later on. So I would just recommend switching it when you use it, and then it'll automatically switch back when you're done. So there, switch to the game. I hate 8:7 aspect ratio for NES, but anyway. All right, let's see. Now, Darkwing Duck never has ghost inputs, so like false diagonals. And so D-pad test is a good test here, because if it doesn't work here, if you do this on your D-pad and you wiggle it and Darkwing Duck starts moving, then you know you've got some serious issues. That's happened once on this channel with a really, really bad device. So what we're going to do now is just go into another game. Now, in the menu, the controls are swapped. So I'm going to do the contra test. I find sometimes, like, I'm all about the message that I put out there into the universe. And sometimes, we get people hooked up onto issues that are non-issues, if you know what I mean. So let's just see if this D-pad causes any issues in the contra test. So what you want to do is you want to see if the little man moves. If I wiggle the D-pad, so we go down and then we wiggle. See, it's failing the contra test, like kind of hopelessly. If I can do Street Fighter moves, then in my book, the D-pad is great, or at least acceptable. So I could do my Shoryuken and my Hadoukens on command, pretty much. A few little errors there. Not the best, but pretty good. And then to throw a curveball into the mix, this is the Gamesir Nova Lite, and I gave this a good review because it is a good controller. Now, this has got more of the Xbox style sausage handheld concept, which is a very scientific theory that I've come up with on my own without any verification from any scientific body whatsoever. So there's a sausage here. It gives you a good grip. And Xbox know what they're doing. The controller style is very much modeled on that. They've gone for some nice floppy joysticks. These joysticks are probably better than the Anbernic. I would say in terms of quality and all that, this is on par with the Anbernic. The one thing I didn't like with this is how the color doesn't match the device, of the LED here, whatever. This is a 2.4 gigahertz and Bluetooth controller. I'll just verify that on the screen now, but I do recall this being for both, and it's cheaper. This is cheaper on Amazon than the Anbernic. So there's a curveball for you, a very nice controller for cheaper. Boom. But the proof is in the use, and the only reason I wouldn't use this for my personal use is the RGB lighting. I think my son will enjoy this if I set up a console system in the lounge. I think he likes the lights and that. But I don't. I love RGB. I'm a guy who shoots 35mm film. I like things old school. I don't like flashing lights. But when it comes to gaming, my laptop has got RGB. My dock for my Steamdeck has got RGB. I just like RGB with gaming, but I just don't like it on the controller. This to me is tasteful and looks lovely. This is my controller of choice at the moment. I just really enjoy it. So yeah, RGB is a deal breaker for me. But you're thinking, what, Adin, you're a crazy person. A controller with RGB is all I want. Well, that, and for me, not to have this nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach that everything is coming to an end, and the only way for me to stop it is to hide in a hole and wait for the madness to pass. And to that I say, all right, so I used this in testing mostly to finish a game called The Invincible, which I played on my laptop. And for a walking sim like that, so it's literally just a walking sim and you use a few buttons, so it's not a high intensity game, but what you want for that is comfort, and the controller needs to be light, because you're basically watching a movie and you're pressing a few buttons. And for that, this was actually ideal. This was a lovely walking sim handle, because it's super comfortable. They copied 8-bit do, and it's light because it's a cheaper device. But let's move over to something more demanding. I've been playing Wolfenstein. I played 1 and 2, so I'm going to start up Youngblood and give that a go now for the test. I mostly use 2.4 gigahertz for my gameplay, and the connection was tricky at times. Like now in my testing for this video, it's flawless, but when I first connected it, it was a bit of a pain, but it seemed to just eventually start connecting all the time. The rumble motor is very nice. It's nice and it's smooth, and the rumble motor is not audible. That's a key feature. And here I'll feature my very useless footage of me playing Forza Horizon using the analog trigger and how it works. So it works very well, and like I mentioned, the travel distance of this trigger is not exceptionally far, but for Forza Horizon, the way that they've calibrated it, the calibration of these triggers works very, very well for racing games. It's great. And functionality, here's where like the rubber hits the road with this thing, because you've got this manual and you've got a list of connection tools. So wireless pairing, which is Bluetooth pairing, which already, like when I first started doing these reviews, they say wireless pairing. I have no idea what they're talking about. It's Bluetooth pairing, man. Anyway, little gripe. But you've got switch, X input, which is what I would do for my laptop, Android, and iOS. Now there's a shortcut key for each different type of pairing. So press pairing button 2 seconds for switch. So if you're a switch user and you use Bluetooth, that's going to be the easiest use case. You just press the pairing button. Now if you do X input, it's the X button and the pairing button, which is fine for Bluetooth. But now if you are using Bluetooth and 2.4 gigahertz on an X input device, now X input, press this for 2 seconds, let it flash. Then you go to the device. Now for X input on 2.4 gigahertz, it's the Y button and the connection thing. Then you wait. Once it starts flashing slower, so once the light on here flashes a little bit slower, then you press the home button. That is just ridiculous. Like I'm getting worked up here because that is crazy. That is just too much to do, too much work. Like, why am I working to use this piece of technology? So that is where the problem with this price point comes in, because I understand what Anbernic are doing. They're making a cheaper device that people can buy on their website, and it will work because the device is $17.99 on their website and people will pay for it when they're buying other stuff. And in that use case, in that situation, it does make sense because you're going to pay shipping for 2 things, it will be less. But if you are just buying this, the price is too high for the amount of fiddliness that you're getting it at. So what I would recommend is take a photo of this setup and save it somewhere on your phone that you know you're going to get access to regularly, or give it like a search tag so that if you go connection for the Anbernic controller, you're going to find it. Let's say you don't use it for 2 months and you forget all those buttons. But again, certain use cases, it's going to be super simple. Like for instance, if you're only doing 2.4 gigahertz connection, once you've connected it and you're only using it for a single use case, it's just going to work forever basically. But as soon as you change the use case, that's when it's going to be frustrating and you're going to go, oh shit, where's the manual? And you're going to have lost the manual and you're going to have to go looking for it. So I am getting a little bit intense about something that's maybe not a very big issue for a lot of people, but it is quite frustrating. Tech needs to get out of the way. It shouldn't be getting in the way of you doing the things that you want to do. So it's annoying how good this is because they've copied 8BitDo. The ergonomics are near perfect. They are copied Switch with the layout, which is one of the nicer front layouts of a controller. And Anbernic make some of the best buttons in the business, some of the best membrane-based buttons in the business. And so in the end, this is actually a really lovely controller.